started my professional career in banking in 1984 with Bank of Credit and Commerce International. And thereafter, I joined a chartered bank in 1989. And my total banking career spanned about 10 years, after which I transited into the oil industry and started a company, Waltersmith and Associates Limited. And that company eventually midwifed Waltersmith Petroman Oil Limited in 1996. And in 2003, we bidded for and won the Ibigwe field as part of the federal government of Nigeria Marginal Field program. So I transitioned from banking into oil and gas as a way to diversify our business. And what I did then was to co-found Waltersmith and Associates, which was the platform for the transition into the oil and gas industry. Waltersmith and Associates formed a joint venture with Petroman Oil of Canada. That joint venture midwifed what is called Waltersmith Petroman Oil today. Waltersmith being the Nigerian company and Petroman being the Canadian company. And that JV was now called Waltersmith Petroman Oil. That was the platform with which we bidded for the Ibigwe field when the marginal field bid round started. And in 2003, we won the marginal field, Ibigwe field. And in 2008, we started producing that field. Once we started producing it, about 5 to 6 years later, we started having some issues around the surface risk. And that was essentially driven by pipeline vandalism and oil theft. And because of that, the whole idea of the refinery then developed. That's when we started thinking about the refinery. And as we fine-tuned the refinery project, we realized that it could actually add value to our country. And so we then decided that we were going to start with a proof of concept of about 5,000 barrels of oil per day refining capacity, which was a modular refinery. The challenges in the course of setting up this refinery were basically around regulatory issues in Nigeria. Because that's always the elephant in the room. There's lack of deregulation of the sector. The question everybody asks you when you pitch a refinery project to them is that Nigeria operates a regulated regime, fiscal regime or pricing regime for the downstream sector, where there's a subsidy regime. And so how do you collect your money? That's a big issue. The second issue is, where do you get the crude oil to refine, given where you are located? Because we are in the inland, the question is, how are you going to get enough crude oil to sustain this refinery over the long term? Those are two key issues for us. But as you know, when we're developing this project, we were also trying to solve some other issues for our upstream business, which was the above surface risk for our business, which was driven by crude theft and pipeline vandalization. That was really contributing to about almost 15% of losses that we're experiencing of our crude that was being stolen. So, we had to figure out a way to make the project work. And then we were more or less like the guinea pig of the program. It was not just about the whole idea, but also trusting our ability to conceive and deliver the project. That was also an issue because it has never been really done in this environment, apart from the big ones that the government has done. So in addressing those issues, we then said, look, first we engaged government, engaged the NNPC at the time. And the NNPC then gave us the assurance that they will give us some access to some feedstock from nearby fields around us. We got some assurance, and then they opened up the door for us to start engagement with some of the asset owners in order to assure us of sustainability of feedstock to this refinery going forward. So that discussion is ongoing, and we're still having that that conversation with them. That's to sustain the current asset that we have, not to talk about the other modules that we're going to implement. Now, so that discussion is ongoing, but to address the current module of 5,000 and to overcome the issue of access to crude, we then had to commit our own crude, which is from the Ibigwe field that we're producing, just by our own efforts. So we have been able to do that now, and we're going to be providing the crude oil from our field, even though it's a marginal field, with the understanding that NNPC and other government-related agencies and the Minister of Petroleum are going to support us to ensure we get this feedstock for the long-term sustainability of all of this refining capacity that we're trying to bring upstream for government. And then the regulation part of it. We then chose products that were technically deregulated, which was diesel and kerosene and HFO, as the first module that we're going to take into the market. And for us, it was a proof of concept. We had conceived the project, we're executing it on time, and we know that there's going to be a market for it without necessarily going back to government for payment of subsidy, even though our long-term goal was still to get into the PMS segment of the market and the jet fuel segment of the market that still had some level of regulation. But the whole idea was to start this 5,000 barrels per day module within the segment of the market that is not essentially regulated, so we can get into the market and get the business up and running and demonstrate to all the key stakeholders that this is possible and that this project can actually be conceived and delivered successfully in the market. The project that we have conceived now, which is a 5,000 barrels a day refinery, will contribute about 1.6% of the total domestic refining capacity in Nigeria. For us, that is a proof of concept. We've just started that as a first module of 3 modules that we're looking to implement. This first module is 5,000 barrels of oil per day. That's going to produce diesel, kerosene, and HFO. And then we're also going to do the second module, which is 25,000 barrels of oil per day. That will produce also, in addition to the diesel, kerosene, and HFO, will also produce naphtha, PMS, and jet fuel. That's the second standalone module that's going to come in. So that will give us a 30,000 barrels per day capacity. And then ultimately, we'll do the balance of 20,000 barrels of oil per day capacity. And that will then give us about 50,000 barrels of oil per day capacity once we complete all the 3 modules. Now, what we then see, we're going to now leverage on that to then go on, stretch it to petrochemicals and other chemicals related industries. That's why we are now looking at the opportunity or the possibility of setting up an industrial and innovation park around where we are currently operating, because the facilities that will be used in this complex will be shared by other potential users of that park. So we're looking at deploying about 300 megawatts of power, electricity, also in modules. And the power that we're going to be deploying will support the refineries, the 3 modules of the refineries that we're going to set up. And essentially, we're going to be using the gas from that whole area. And it's on the back of this infrastructure that we then we're then anticipating to set up an industrial park that will then house other industries that use petroleum products as inputs into their manufacturing process. We see that we are going to transition from an integrated energy company to really promoting an industrial and manufacturing hub where companies will then co-locate with us and can leverage the resources that we deploy in that complex to help reduce the manufacturing cost and position Nigeria as a very efficient manufacturing center.